Hi all my students, here's your English facilitator, Mrs. Hemangi R. Naik, back with you again to continue with our portion of treasure chest poems. Okay, today we are going to do a new poem, so let's start off with that immediately. We are doing A Considerable Speck by Robert Frost. Robert Frost, 1874 to 1963. One of America's greatest poets, received more honors than any contemporary literary figure in the USA. The first thing that strikes the reader about the poetry of Robert Frost is that it is deceptively simple in nature. Mark the word deceptively simple. So he always had an underlying message, but it looks very simple. Frost wrote on the simplest themes in the most easy to understand language. However, a careful reading of his poems reveal that they are subtle, intricate, complex, and richly textured with several layers of meaning. A Considerable Speck by Robert Frost is a wonderfully graphic description of intelligence in action. The subject of the poem is an invisible mite, a little insect, which the poet narrator discovers on a sheet of paper. So here the narrator is the poet himself. Okay, please remember that. That's why they have used the word poet narrator. Is discovers on the sheet of a paper. The opening lines of the poem are an account of the mite's panic and its frantic efforts to run across a page of writing in a futile attempt to evade the narrator. It is only when the mite moves that the narrator realizes that the speck is a living mite. Once he realizes that it is intelligent, he follows its desperate actions with interest. The poet goes on to explain the reason why he chooses not to save the life of the mite. The poem can be seen as a perfect illustration of what Albert Schweitzer called as a reverence for life. Okay, so let's come to the poem. A Considerable Speck by Robert Frost. A speck that would have been beneath my sight on any but a paper sheet so white, set off across what I had written there, and I had idly poised my pen in air to stop it with a period of ink, when something strange about it made me think. This was no dust speck by my breathing blown, but unmistakably a living mite, with inclinations it could call its own. It paused as with suspicion of my pen, and then came racing wildly on again to where my manuscript was not yet dry, then paused again, and either drank or smelt with loathing, for again it turned to fly. Plainly, with an intelligence I dealt. It seemed too tiny to have room for feet, yet must have had a set of them complete, to express how much it didn't want to die. It ran with terror and with cunning crept. It faltered. I could see it hesitate. Then in the middle of the open sheet, cower down in desperation to accept whatever I accorded it of fate. I have none of the tenderer than thou collectivistic regimenting love, with which the modern world is being swept. But this poor microscopic item now, since it was nothing I knew evil of, I let it lie there till I hope it slept. I have a mind myself and recognize mind when I meet with it in any guise. No one can know how glad I am to find on any sheet the least display of mind. Okay, so that much for so I've just read the poem for you. I don't know if you could actually get the gist of the poem. So I'll first explain the poem to you in a short summary, okay, which I normally don't do, but for this poem I'm going to do. I'll give you a little summary of what has been happening in the poem. Now this poet or the narrator the poet himself, he is the narrator, and he was writing a poem. He was writing something on a piece of paper. Now, when he was writing that something on a piece of paper, he happens to see a very minute speck, very, very minute, a small little speck. And first he just dismisses it, thinking, oh, it's just some piece of dirt which has just come from the air or something of that sort. But then after some time, just as he is about to continue with his writing, he realizes that this mite or this speck was moving. So as soon as he realizes that, he says that, oh, this mite is moving. That means it's not just a minute speck, okay, but it's moving. And it finds that the living mite, this mite which was on his paper, is trying to evade the poet's writing and the poet's ink, because he finds it very distasteful. He doesn't like the mite doesn't like the smell of it, and he finds it distasteful. So he's trying to escape from the hands of the narrator into safety. He doesn't want to be killed, so he's trying to fight for himself, and he's trying to find a way out of the paper. That is what the poem is saying. Now, when the poet sees this, there is some thought in the poet's mind that this mite is just like how we humans are in the hands of fate or in the hands of God. Because the mite, it just cowers down when it realizes that it is not able to accept, it's not able to be able to run away from that sheet of paper. So it sort of just submits to its fate, that whatever is in my naseeb, whatever is in my fate, let it just happen. Now when he sees that, like we human beings, sometimes whatever is in our destiny, we say, okay, let it happen. Okay. Now this poet, he is in the position of compared to God. Like the poet or the narrator or the writer is, you can say, compared to God, where the poet sees this mite trying to save itself, and then the poet does not kill it. He refrains from killing the mite, and just because of the intelligence of the mite, not because he has some collectivistic regimenting love. That collectivistic regimenting love is that the profit of the group is more important than the individual. That is what it actually means. So he's saying, not because I am tenderer than thou, or I am very soft and I want to live for the group. No, it's not like that. But he allows the mite to live because of his intelligence. Okay. And so he hopes that the mite will go to sleep. And then the poet ultimately tells us in the last 4 lines that when I see something very intelligent and in any form on a piece of paper, I feel very happy. Okay, so that is the summary of the poem. And I hope you got a gist of the poem. We'll see it in detail, of course. I will be explaining it to you. But this was the summary. It's talking about that little speck which the poet found on its piece of paper on which it was writing. Okay, so now let's begin with trying to understand the poem and comprehend it in a good manner. Now, the very first title, the title of the poem, A Considerable Speck, by Robert Frost. There was another poem by Robert Frost which was The Road Not Taken. We earlier had that in your ICSE syllabus. That's also a beautiful poem. If you are able to read it, do read it somewhere. It's a very good poem. You'll enjoy it. It's very simple. Okay, now we come to A Considerable Speck. Now, if you notice the words over here, look at the syntax of the word. What do you mean by syntax? Arrangement of words in phrases to make a sentence or something. Okay, so the syntax over here is considerable and speck. So this positioning of words that the poet has taken, this juxtapositioning which he has taken. What is the meaning of juxtapositioning? Putting 2 words. It is a part of syntax, but it is a style where we put 2 words absolutely together, and these 2 words have absolute different meanings. Then it becomes an oxymoron. Okay, oxymoron is a literary device. So now this literary device of oxymoron, the poet has used in the title itself. Okay, considerable means what? Considerable means something which is worth consideration, something which is significant, something which requires your attention. Okay, that is considerable. And what is the meaning of speck? Speck is something which is worthless, which doesn't have much value. So by juxtapositioning these two words, considerable and speck, the poet has, in the title itself, he has given us an oxymoron. What is an oxymoron? An oxymoron is a literary device. You can write down that definition. Oxymoron is a figure of speech, a literary device that comprises of two contradictory terms. Okay, and what are the two contradictory terms I explained to you over here? Considerable and speck. These two are contradictory. So he has given that. And so something which is significant and something which is worthless. So ultimately we realize that this considerable speck was actually not insignificant. It was significant and therefore it is considerable. You understood? Considerable means significant, जिसका कुछ importance हो. Speck वो चीज़ होती है जिसका कोई importance नहीं हो. So something which is significant, something which is insignificant. These two are put together. And then by the end of the poem, towards the end of the poem, we realize that this speck which was supposed to be insignificant is actually significant. So the word considerable has been used as an adjective to describe this speck. You understood? So that is the meaning of the title itself, that it is an oxymoron, okay? A considerable speck. And a speck that would have been beneath my sight. Now what do you mean by beneath my sight? Something beneath is something which is lower in position. You can take down the meanings while I am teaching. So what was I saying? Beneath. Beneath is something which is lower in position and which is not good enough to be seen. That is the meaning of beneath, okay? And speck is something a very small piece of dirt. Actually, speck is a small piece of dirt. So he's saying a speck that would have been beneath my sight on any but a paper sheet so white. So his paper sheet was so white and he found this little piece of dirt on that and it was beneath his sight. He gave it no importance at the beginning. Set off across what I had written there. So when he had already written something on that and this speck, suddenly he saw it running. Set off across means it was running towards what he had written on that. And I had idly poised my pen in the air. So he's saying, when did I notice this? When he's saying I was writing something. So he was probably thinking. So when he was thinking and when he was writing, his pen was poised in the air, just lazily as if he was thinking something. When suddenly his eye caught this speck on the sheet of paper. And it would not have caught his attention, but suddenly it found that this small little speck began to run. Okay, so he saw movement of that speck. To stop it with a period of ink. Period of ink means a full stop. Over here it means a full stop. So idly means lazily and poised means not moving but ready to move. Poised means it's not moving at the moment but it is ready to move at any minute. Okay. When something strange about it made me think. So then the poet found it very strange. He said, no, there is something strange about this, and that put him to thought. Okay. This was no dust speck by my breathing blown, but unmistakably a living mite. So he's saying, I realized that this was moving. So it was not something, a small piece of dirt which had come out, which had just come by my breathing or something, but it was a very small insect. A very small insect is called a mite. With inclinations, it could call its own. Inclination means feeling. So it had feelings of its own. It paused as with suspicion of my pen. So when he saw my pen, it paused. Okay, he had some suspicion about the pen, and then came racing wildly on again. So then it came running again to where my manuscript was not yet dry. So where I had just written something, the pen was still not dry, and it came running over there again. Then paused again, and either drank or smelt with loathing, for again it turned to fly. So he's saying then he came too near my ink, and my ink was not yet dry. So he poised over there again. He paused over there again. The mite stopped over there, and then with loathing. Loathing is a distaste for something. Loathing is a strong feeling of distaste or hatred. So with loathing, for again it turned to fly. To fly over here means to flee. So when it got that smell of that ink, it sort of hesitated, and it decided, no, I want to fly off again. With an intelligence I dealt. So it turned to flee, and then the author is saying to himself that plainly means clearly I was dealing with an intelligence, means with something which could think. Somebody, some living being which had a mind of its own. Okay, so plainly, clearly, with an intelligence I dealt. It seemed too tiny to have room for feet. Means this little minute thing was so small that I was wondering how it could have feet. It was too tiny to have any feet, but yet must have had a set of them complete. So he's saying that even though it was so tiny and I was wondering how it could have had feet, but I'm sure it had a complete set of feet. Why? Because it was running here and there. Okay. So he's saying, yet must have had a set of them complete to express how much it didn't want to die. So the instinct of survival was so strong. It ran with terror. Terror is fright. It ran with terror and with cunning crept. Cunning crept means with intelligence. So it crept with intelligence. It ran with terror and with cunning crept. It faltered. I could see it hesitate. It faltered means it stumbled. And he's saying I could see how it was hesitating. Then in the middle of the open sheet means that big white paper which was open, on which the poet was writing, the author was writing, it just stumbled on that, and then it came right to the middle of the paper. It came to the middle of the paper, and then what happened? Then in the middle of the open sheet, cowered down in desperation to accept. So it came right to the middle of the paper, and then it cowered down. It sort of recoiled. It relapsed. Okay, as if it was just accepting its fate. That whatever is my fate, I'm accepting my fate. So then in the middle of the open sheet, covered down in desperation to accept whatever I accorded it of fate. So at this moment, the poet realized, the poet or the narrator felt that it tried to run all around as if trying to save itself from death, and then realizing that it would not be able to escape, it covered down in the middle of the sheet. So in the middle of the paper, it came and it rested over there, and it just became very quiet, as if it was accepting its fate. And who was the fate writer? The author. So he was as if he was accepting that whatever the author would write for me, I am willing to accept that fate. Okay. I have none of the tender than thou collectivistic regimenting love. Now what do you mean by tender than thou? I told you more delicate. So he's saying that I don't have. Tenderer than thou means more delicate, loving than you are. More delicate or loving than you are. Collectivistic, regimenting love. So now like I told you, the collectivistic means an attitude where the emphasis is on the needs of the group rather than the individual. Okay, and regimenting is something which is imposed compulsorily by society or by state. Okay, so from somebody from outside. Okay, so he is saying that this little insect, it came, it covered down, and then it as if it gave in to my fate, that whatever I write for it, that fate it is going to accept. And the poet is saying that I am not that type of a person who believes more in the collective, means who believes more that the group necessities or the needs of the group should override the needs of an individual. The poet is saying, I don't believe in that, because that was actually where the world has swept with the modern world. The world today is accepting that, but I never accepted it. But this poor microscopic item now, so this small little microscopic mite, which was just so small, it was right on the middle of my page, and it had covered down, it had willingly accepted that whatever I write for it, it is accepting that fate, since it was nothing I knew evil of. So he's saying, I did not know that this little microscopic thing had done anything evil to me. And so I decided, I was hoping that at the middle of the page it would rest and it would go off to sleep. I let it lie there till I hope it slept. I have a mind myself and recognize mind when I meet with it in any guise. So he's saying, the poet is saying that I have a mind for myself. Mind for myself here means I have an intellectual capacity to think. I have a thinking faculty. So I have a mind myself, and whenever I recognize this mind in somebody else, so when I recognize that another living being has got some intelligence of its own, then I recognize that in whatever shape it comes. I have recognized that, and when I recognize that, what happens? No one can know how glad I am. So at such a time, I am so glad about everything. No one can know how glad I am to find on any sheet the least display of mind. Display of mind over here means the show of intelligence. Okay, so he's saying, what is a show of intelligence over here? That this little mite, this little microscopic living creature was running around with those tiny feet just to protect itself and just so that it may survive. So he's saying, when I had that in my mind that it would survive, so the poet in these last 4 lines, these last 4 lines are very important, children. These 4 lines, the poet is saying, I have a mind, means I have a thinking capacity, I have an intelligence which can think. And this intelligence which can think, when I see it in somebody else, so when I see that somebody else has that same intelligence, and this intelligence he has described by using a capital M. So he's saying this mind. So here with the capital M, it means this intelligence. So mind has this faculty of thinking has been personified with a capital M. Okay, so this mind, when I meet with it in any guise, in any cover, no matter what the cover is, but if I meet this intelligence, then I know, what I do, I know that I am very glad that I realize that there are on any sheet of display, on any sheet, the least display of mind. So what makes me very happy is when I find that somebody or something, some little living being is so intelligent, then I become very happy. So on any sheet, the least display of mind. I hope I have been able to explain these last 4 lines to you. I have a mind myself and recognize means I have a thinking faculty. Over here it means thinking faculty. Then mind with a capital M means capital M, so that thinking faculty has been personified as intelligence. So there is a capital M over there. And I meet it, when I meet this intelligence in any cover, in any form, in any shape, then I am so happy that on any sheet, means on any white paper, when I recognize that somebody is intelligent, it makes me very happy. So any piece of writing, we can interpret it as that any piece of writing on a white sheet which shows intelligence or which displays an amount of intelligence, it makes the poet Robert Frost very happy. Okay, so that is the meaning of this poem, and with that I come to an end of this poem explanation. And now we'll continue in the next module all the other things that we need to discuss. So till then, please do study and revise the module so that you are able to understand the poet, the remaining part in better manner. Bye children, see you all.